The power of the dark side.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Mad Dad special. We're doing another roundtable discussion this evening. Today we saw a lot of stuff drop into the game. We have to talk about a lot, and we have very little time to do it in, so we're going to just blaze through it. We're hoping to put up another Hoth off the press. That's going to be a more condensed version of these roundtable discussions that we're having throughout this week. We do have two of our returning guests. We have Curiel, who's always on. Let's be honest, but he's still the man, sitting in his car just to film this for you guys. By the way, and then we have
effort.
there you go. And then we have returning guest Faustin. Of course, you know him from if you've been watching our roundtable discussions. He was a part of our last one, and maybe we're going to keep having him on. Faustin, what's up?
I'm glad to be here. Still just preparing for these territory war changes as the new coordinator for our guild, and happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And then we don't have the bearded one, or the other bearded one in this case. We're missing
I got a beard.
He's back from the first time from being banned from YouTube. He's super controversial and edgy because of that. We have Goodnight Punk from the Shattered Ordered podcast.
What's up, guys? How's it going? Oh man, that's great. Looking pretty dark over there, Curiel.
Yeah, it's just don't. We'll not drink too much, so we don't go to the back seat of the car. So
hey,
we'll try to keep it in the front seat.
All right, that's probably a smart idea.
I just love the close up on your eyes; really brings them out. We should do this more often.
Yeah, how do I move you as the only one on my screen?
Right. Fantastic. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and start diving into some of the topics. Obviously, there's three big things that happened today. We had the new look at Darth Treya. We had the quality of life changes, and then we had the raid. So we got information on all of those. But before we actually start diving into those, there was two talking points I kind of wanted to go over with you guys. So STH is the character of the month, Stormtrooper Han. So we're going to throw it around the table here. Do we expect a Scoundrel or Bounty Hunter rework because we're seeing STH as the character of the month? Or is it just possible that STH rework is in preparation for the Han Solo movie, or maybe they're just doing it for the Han Solo movie to tie in somehow? Let's start off with our new guest, Goodnight Punk. What's your thought, man?
Well, without giving too much away from what we're going to talk about with this new raid, I will say that bounty hunters is kind of a big deal in there. But we'll talk about it a little bit later, I'm sure. So him being I don't think he's a scoundrel. I don't think he's a bounty hunter.
He's a scoundrel.
Yep.
So he's just a scoundrel. So I guess this whole idea is off topic. I'll go off the bounty hunter rail here. I don't know what the deal is with Stormtrooper Han because it's just so random. I don't think that they're done with dark side characters. I think there'll be more of them in this coming month, and I don't see how Stormtrooper Han ties in at all, actually.
Fair enough. Faustin, what do you think, man? You got any crazy ideas?
Yeah, none of the above. I think it's bringing Commander Luke Skywalker back and keeping him on a quarterly schedule for the year. Because what was it? I think 5.5 months ago was when he was released, maybe 6. I could be wrong about that, but I know that they brought him back again for the Christmas thing.
Yeah, I want to say it was probably he was out for 4 months, and then they brought him back about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and then yeah.
So to sort of tie in with the movies, I think maybe Stormtrooper Han will be required for that. But remember, it's an origin story, so it wouldn't really make sense for a hero's journey style of taking all the different Hans from later in his life to introduce a fifth Han.
What are you talking about? Time paradox, dude? We go all crazy with it.
Well, spoiler alert real quick, if anybody watches Star Wars Rebels, but they are sort of touching on that nowadays.
That's what I've heard.
Whoa. Crazy.
I know. I'm very conflicted, but I like it. But anyways, about Stormtrooper Han, I think it is in preparation for another Commander Luke Skywalker event. Maybe also something to do with the movie. I don't anticipate a Scoundrel rework. Honestly, I got my hopes up too much for Bounty Hunter stuff. I don't expect that at least until April, maybe even closer to May.
Cool. And Curio, you got any thoughts, man?
You guys kind of checked all the boxes because I mean, literally, it at first when I opened up the forum, I was like, "What, Stormtrooper Han?" And then I was like, "Okay, yeah, CLS movie, the new requirements for the new buffs for having the bounty hunters and scoundrels in the raid." So he checks off a lot of boxes. So yeah, I mean, they could go anywhere with it. I'm kind of leaning towards they're preparing for once again with the raid. I think they're going towards CLS simply because CLS is a featured hero inside of the raid. So maybe they do bump it up just a little bit faster, so folks can get CLS for the raid. Maybe.
I could
You
definitely.
guys have convinced me. You've convinced me. I think the CLS thing. I think the CLS thing makes the most sense. I think that's definitely because honestly, what else could it be? Like, I don't think they're going to add a bunch of rebels this month.
You know what?
And that's all he is a scoundrel or a rebel. So,
yeah.
With the new artwork, Jedi Knight Luke, maybe confirmed. Who knows?
hey, you never know. Well, that would mean I'd have to panic farm the crap out of Hermit Yoda. So let's not hope for that.
He's like, I just got done with the vets. Come on.
Yeah, I actually switched over to Wampa as soon as I unlocked Hermit Yoda. At least something for territory battles,
Oh,
for the platoons.
I think I got Wampa 7-star 3 weeks after he came out, and I have been using him in everything at Gear 12 forever. So
That's awesome.
I love that. I love that bastard.
God, I'm jealous. You guys are just.
I just want them to come out with like a beast tag for its own. I don't remember what you call it, category, and I want them to make the creatures from Episode 2 Geonosian Arena. I want to see more of the stuff that we've seen from the Rebel show, the Clone Wars show, especially on Onderon with their whole Beastmaster deal. Maybe even the guy from Return of the Jedi that what was his name, Malachi, something like that, Malakili, so whatever his name is, that was the Rancor.
Oh, the keeper.
Wouldn't that be sweet? Like, make him the leader, some kind of like Beastmaster.
I would love
just throw beasts in behind him, make a new synergy there. That'd be sweet.
Yeah. Put a spitball in it if you want to.
Fair
bring
enough.
in a first subject.
All right, so
hey, that's the kind of stuff I like.
Word. So there was another thing that kind of flew under the radar. I haven't seen too many people talking about this. It's a possible or potential consideration in this patch. Was it a bug, or was it not intended to see in the live patch? And that is when you go to the search bar and you search up HK47, he is now showing up under the bounty. Or I'm sorry, when you search bounty hunters, HK47 is now showing up in that list.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Wow, where did you get that little gem? Man, that's a good one.
I thought you were going to talk about the added feature of mods disappearing, but
oh yeah,
in a different way.
I've got notes about that too.
Yeah, trying to keep it positive.
It would be interesting if HK later gets a tag for bounty hunter, especially if they are looking at a bounty hunter rework. Later, especially with the dark side territory battle special missions there. But personally, I don't think it's working as intended. HK's lore, he was an assassin droid. He wasn't a bounty hunter. He was Revan's personal droid. He would go on missions and get his memory wiped. He didn't really fit into that category. But the game is all considered legends anyways. It's not canon. So they could just do it for convenience sake instead of having to dish out more bounty hunters.
Yeah. Good night, Punk. You got any ideas on it, man?
I'm with. So we can go back to the original thought where I was talking about something totally different. But the whole raid thing with the bounty hunters, the fact that now if he kind of pops up there, I think it lends credence to the idea that there might be something coming for bounty hunters. Who knows when, but I think that they're going to play some kind of role going forward. And one of the main things we always talk about on our show is that I don't recommend right now that anyone worries about bounty hunters, just because there's not enough. They're literally so niche right now that leveling them up isn't worth it, because all they're good for is special missions and dark side territory battles, right? But
Absolutely.
now you're seeing a spot where now they're going to have some kind of role and betterment in this new raid on top of dark side territory battles, and on top of that, if they were to be reworked, they might end up being a good, either a defensive team or a good offensive team in territory wars. It would end up making them more versatile than what they are now, which is almost basically none. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Carol, you got anything to throw in, dude?
Dude, I'm just impressed you found a little nugget, dude. I didn't even hear about that all day. So yeah, no, I really don't have anything to add on that. That was awesome, man.
Okay, fair enough. So previously in our roundtable discussion, we obviously talked a lot about Darth Sion, Visas Mar. I think that's the correct pronunciation of that. Is it Visas or Visus? Anyway.
Whatever.
Not going to work here anymore, that's for sure.
So we talked really deep on them. So today we're just going to be pretty much focusing on Darth Treya. We may be talking about the other two characters as we talk about Treya and all the other things that are going on. So let's talk about our kid. And let's get into the basic. Deceptive Strike. The final text, and keep in mind before we go any further, all this is all speculation. All this is not finalized. This is beta footage and is subject to change. If it changes, don't blame us.
Right.
So the basic is Deceptive Strike. The final text thus far says, deal special damage to a target enemy and daze them for 2 turns. Treya inflicts all debuffs on allies to target enemy for 1 turn. If any debuffs were inflicted, reduce the cooldown of Saber Storm, which is her first special, by 1. So, look how this is good. If one of your teammates is suffering from a stun, you give it to your opponent instead. So when it falls off under an EP lead, your whole team can gain turn meter from that. It seems like it's just disgusting, especially because it's on a freaking basic. So let's go ahead and throw it to Curiel first. Curiel, what are your thoughts on the basic, man?
Well, ironically, as I was reading it, it seems like you're actually not going to use your basic as much as you use your specials. It's almost going to turn into a special debuff for you. So, like, if you got your guys like debuffed, you'll use the basic and get rid of it. But honestly, with the cooldown reduction in the storm, they were saying in the videos that it's literally luck up almost all the time. It's available to you almost all the time. So it's kind of a weird transposition of the skills. It literally does feel like it's going to be a special ability that is a dispel, but it's their basic. So that was kind of interesting. And yeah, I mean, the tempo swing is real. I mean, you're talking about stuns. You're talking about anything shatters or exposes. There's a lot, and it puts them all on one character. So you have your stuff spread out on everybody, and then you throw 6 debuffs on one character. The only thing I was curious about is, you strike first and then the debuffs get applied, or is the attack trigger the debuffs being removed and then being put onto the character and then you strike?
Right. So in case you're putting on an expose, will it hit extra hard? Is what you're saying?
Right. Or
yeah,
like So there's some lot of timing issues. I don't know how that's going to play out. We never saw footage of her using it and the timing going that way, but I don't know.
Fair enough. Good night, Punk. What's your thoughts, man?
I think that's I hadn't even thought about that point, because if you're popping an expose, putting an expose and popping it on the same move, that's a pretty powerful thing there. Or stagger, or any of those ones that you have to hit them before it actually takes place. It's pretty nuts to think about. But even without that part of it, the whole ability is nuts. Just if you were to put days on basic and just that was it, it's already a great basic, right? But now you got a way to take all the debuffs on your team and put them on one person. On top of that, like to your point, Saber Storm is pretty much going to be able to be used every other turn, depending on what team you're fighting and the debuffs that they have. Because you're going to have to, if you use Saber Storm, it's going to go back to 4. So then you're going to use your basic again, and it's going to bring it back down to 0, and then you can use it the next turn. It's just it seems like it could go back and forth and back and forth. And then you throw in the fact that she has a second special or does she have a second special? She has 2 specials, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was
you
the
could
thing.
go real nuts with it.
Right.
Wait,
yeah.
how does it go down to 0 from 4? I mean, you take the turn to use the basic. The basic removes it 1 more, so it should go down to 2. No.
Oh, you're right. No. Oh, okay. I was reading the ability wrong. I thought it was if any I thought it was reduced the cooldown by 1 for every debuff.
Okay,
my
so
God.
Right.
Very different scenario.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I thought it was ridiculous. But you've now you've shown me how this can be less crazy than I thought it was. So
I still think it's freaking bananas. Like, it totally is. It's probably one of the top basics in the game. I think it rivals Raid Han in all seriousness. Faustin, what's your take, man?
I have thoughts. My thoughts include, I believe the only other character right now that
Did that
inflicts
scare
days
the
on
crap out
basic-
of everybody else, by the way, when he said, I have thoughts?
None of those thoughts anymore. But
brace for impact.
so the only other character that inflicts days on a basic is Captain Han Solo, correct?
Right.
So his big thing is.
Wait, does Zeb?
Oh, you're right.
No,
I didn't think about Zeb. He
no,
does.
Zeb isn't days.
He does. He dazes, and if you already have daze, then he stuns, and then his special is a stagger. So good call. So this is our third character that will inflict daze on a basic. Now, personally, I think this is going to be really good with the rest of her kit against Commander Luke Skywalker teams. There's not going to be all that countering anymore. There's not going to be a Phoenix worry there. So you can definitely use that for those reasons. I actually think it's going to be very useful against other Sith metas. I mean, say like you're going up against a Vader with your Treya team. He puts Force Crush on you. All your guys have all those dots. If she then puts all those dots on one guy, he's going to get like 10 to 15 dots because it's one of each debuff, and each person has individual dots on them. I see this being honestly kind of broken. I mean, let alone the speculation on the order of operations if there's exposes involved. That's going to be incredible. So then again, it comes down to, are these new inflictions, are these refreshing current debuffs, and is it going to be stacking stuff? So it's really just going to come down to once we see it.
Yeah, that's also a really interesting question. What if they are already affected by a debuff, or it's multiple debuffs of the same type that don't stack, not like Vader's dot or anything? Will that count toward will that count toward putting multiple stacks on and they're falling off, so EP's turn meter could go really bananas there?
Yeah.
I see it with a lot of potential.
See, I always
It has
look at
potential.
everything. I look at everything from the point of, will this benefit Wampa? And the idea of stacking 15 dots on one turn for my Wampa to just come in and clean house is just an amazing prospect to me.
So you go with Cullen Blade too from Vader, because I know those two were.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Tank.
For sure. So the benefit of being a guest on a show is that I have all the time in the world to look things up. So the question was about days basics. The only other 3 that we weren't mentioned was Veteran Smuggler Chewbacca does it, Death Trooper does it, and so does BB-8 if you have Tenacity already on the opponent. So there's so I think there's about 6 of them already that do days, but some of them are conditional.
Well, I appreciate the fact check.
Yeah, I didn't know. That's why I looked,
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's great. Okay, so moving on. First special, Saber Storm. This is kind of what we were alluding to. So the final text in its current iteration says deal special damage to a target enemy and inflict tenacity down for 2 turns. If Treya has full health, so obviously there's a little bit to talk about there. Deal damage an additional time and inflict ability block for 2 turns. If the target is buffed, deal damage an additional time and inflict healing immunity for 2 turns. This attack can't be evaded with a 4-turn cooldown. All right, so the first things that I want to throw out, aside from the fact that it just has the potential to add 3 debuffs, all of which are super relevant, healing immunity, especially against like Xera's teams or Jedi training raid teams. But this looks like it's going to hit like a truck. We don't have definitive numbers, but in the GIF that they posted on their site, it showed a resistance trooper. You couldn't see his health. You couldn't see how much damage it did. But he wasn't hunkered over, or whatever you want to call that, where, when somebody's really low on life, and it just wiped him out. That's kind of an indication. I'm thinking that it's going to be in the ballpark of like a Leia triple hit or a Raid Han kind of damage scenario. I may be wrong. I'm just assuming. But I think that the debuffs look super solid. I think that the possibility that you're in control of it rather than it being RNG dependent like you see with Leia is totally awesome, because again, you can control full health, and so there's a lot to unpack there. Let's go ahead and throw it to Goodnight Punk first. What's your take on it, man?
I was sitting here thinking while you're saying that, what this move kind of reminds me of with your idea of being able to control it is Ahsoka Tano, or Fulcrum Ahsoka Tano. Yeah, I can't say that name for the life of me.
Fulcrum Ahsoka Tano.
Fulcrum Ahsoka. Her Whirling Blades, I think it's called. I can't remember the move name, but you decide when to use it based on how many buffs you can suck up onto her to make it more powerful, right? Well, if you're doing the same thing with her, and it even looks similar to her move, but you can pick and choose when you're going to use this to make it the strongest. And this thing, it just looks ridiculous. And it says it hits up to what, 3 times? Is she going to throw 3 times, or are you just going to see 3 hits on the one throw? That's what I'm curious.
What it looked like is it looked like Sith Marauders, like double saber action, is what it reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't really be 100% certain. Well, there you go.
That is the animation of it, which, by the way, I just want to say it looks amazing. I mean, it's just
it does for sure.
But I think it's going to be more, the game mechanic wise, I think it's going to be more along the lines of Rey Scavenger's multi-hit rather than like a Dooku multi-attack or Leia multi-attack or Raid Han multi-attack. I think it's all going to be separate instances of the same attack, is the way that I interpret it from the wording.
Yeah, so similar to Ahsoka's 10 hits or whatever she can get with that Whirling Blades. Makes sense. But yeah, it looks like it hits like crazy, and you get those extra buffs. Tenacity down. I mean, she does daze. She can pretty much do any debuff if it's on your team. She does tenacity down. What was it? Ability block and heal immunity. The amount of debuffs that she can possibly do is out of control. Not to mention the next ability when you get there, and the other part too. It's just madness. It's like I'm taking crazy pills.
Curio, what's your take, brother?
Well, I finally have like another multi-hitter to go with my Gear 12 POW. Because POW, he gets all the cooldowns off of multiple hits, and so he's just gonna start rocking.
Oh boy.
I hope you
do. So in our last roundtable discussion, if you missed it, he was singing the praises of Yoda, and now now he is singing the praises of POW. You heard it here. So
yeah, I got a Gear 11 Gam Guard, so I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
I love those obscure characters.
I do think that literally ability block is one of my favorite debuffs. It feels very stunny. It feels very control-y. I'm a control player at heart. And being able to ability block, if it literally just had like ability block, it would already be awesome. And it does just so much more. So, I mean, I think we're all in accord that this is quickly becoming an out-of-control kit. But Keep going.
All right, Foston, what's your thoughts, man?
Oh man, I have thoughts. Do we know of any other character that puts ability block up for 2 turns? I I mean, I already kind of busted myself with "do we know of," but that to me is astounding. Not to mention a multi-hit. Not to mention that she's going to be tenacity down, ability block, and healing immunity in the same turn if she's hitting a buffed guy at full health. Well, while she's at full health, and it can't be evaded. I mean, this is screaming silent synergy to me. I mean, now I think the cannot be evaded part will probably be the Omega effect. But to me, this is anti-Foresight. This is anti-Night Sisters, blocking them from using abilities to do Plague. I don't really think it's going to work that well with Emperor Palpatine, to be honest, because of shock preventing your enemies from gaining buffs in the first place. So you're missing out on that third one for healing immunity. But honestly,
relevant point though. Seriously, I didn't think about that. Really relevant point there. I didn't even think about that. Well, no, wait, because shock prevents it doesn't prevent debuffs, does it?
No. When you're shocked, you cannot gain buffs. So if you're using Palpatine with Treya and your Palpatine shocks a guy, he's not going to get any buffs for your Treya to get the third effect out of Saberstorm, where if target is buffed, deal damage for a third time, and inflict the healing immunity after the ability block.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was misunderstanding. Yeah, I'm with you now, totally.
Other than that, I think it's a direct counter to Visas Mar that we talked about the other day. Just keeping her slowed down, keeping her suppressed, where she's not going to get that benefit from her special, where she's going to have to keep using her basic to cleanse, stuff like that. Also, the only other thing that pops up for me is more order of operation stuff. Is she going to benefit from any health steal stuff from her first attack to get to full health and then get the full health benefit out of this ability?
I would imagine. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, didn't one of the new Sith offer the health steal up buff? Not one of the new things?
I think you're probably thinking of Emperor Palpatine with his the one that he does damage to everybody. He gives everybody health steal for a turn.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the one. So the new rework for Palpatine gives health steal up. So even if she doesn't have very good health steal herself, Palpatine on the team is going to help her to get her to the spot where she's bringing herself back up.
But that asks the question that Foston's asking is it going to check on each hit, or is it only going to check at the beginning? Because if she raises up in health on the first hit and she goes to apply the second hit, yeah, that's what he's asking. And I think that's a really good question. God, Foston.
Another hypothetical is if she happens to go under a Darth Nihilus lead, because I will later go into detail why I do not recommend a Treya lead, but we'll get there when we get there.
Sure. Okay.
I like it.
All right. So let's move on to her second special. It's Isolate. Dispel all buffs on target enemy. Increase their cooldowns by 1. And inflict isolation on target enemy until another enemy is isolated or Treya is defeated. So basically can't be dispelled and all that. Reduce the target allies' cooldowns by 1. So it's like a singular version of Nihilus using his cooldown thing. I use the technical terms thing. And grant them protection up for 50% until the end of the encounter. Isolation can't be copied, dispelled, or resisted. This attack can't be evaded. It has a cooldown of 4. So, real quick, Isolation. It says can't gain buffs. Can't attack or gain positive effects out of turn. Allies can't attack or gain positive effects during that unit's turn. Used against raid bosses. I think it's interesting that they're actually including this clause. It's kind of neat that we're getting to know that. They can't gain buffs. Characters attacking this unit gain critical damage up and health steal up for 1 turn. So super interesting that they're doing that. They furthered on and they said positive effects include turn meter gain, health recovery, protection recovery, assist attack, buffs, revive, ally dispel, health equalization, cooldown reduction. So my big takeaway on this, was that is your ally randomly selected, because it didn't specify, but I would imagine you couldn't click on your target and then click on a target on your side. So I'm assuming that it's got to be randomly selected, even though in the notes it doesn't specify that. Obvious synergy with Emperor Palpatine leadership. It goes around Foresight, Great versus Hermit Yoda, because isolation stops characters from taking actions not on their turns. So that was my big takeaway from the ability. Kirill, you want to lead off on this one?
Yeah, because there's a lot of text. It's the wall of text, right? So you're like, okay, dude, what the hell does this do?
You've been crit by a wall of text. You die.
Yeah. What it does, it turns your dude into a vanilla dude. All right. He just sits there, and he anything that your team synergizes with, any plan that you have for your team, like giving your team offense up, giving your team anything, giving your team murder, turn meter, does nothing now. He just sits there in the corner, and he doesn't gain any benefits, and he just kind of has to sit there and act like he's just a regular dude, and he just sits there, and when it's his turn, he does his one attack, and his turn's over, and that's it. So it's it's going to be super interesting. The one thing that was kind of neat was it gave him 50% protection, and God, it's going to be interesting because there's only one creature, or there's only one character in the game that can give a de facto taunt, and that's R2-D2. So I was thinking, if they isolated my character, I would always smoke screen and let that guy take the hits. So it just becomes like you just get this little buffer dude, because he's got 50% protection. That's a lot of protection. I wish there was another character that could like give out taunts,
Well, General Grievous when he falls below 50% health.
Yes.
Yes. General Grievous relevant.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But other than that, I mean, he's just gonna sit there and not gain from your team and not add to your team, but it's gonna be like this super tough guy all of a sudden. It's a very cool skill, and if you'll notice, you can do another isolation. So you can isolate.
It takes it off of the original person. So that was, you can definitely switch it if they're gonna die out or whatever.
Right. So you can switch it out to you can isolate the highest target priority, and then it gets pretty damn nutty. Like if somebody's gonna go, you can use it as like a de facto stun, per se. So it's super cool.
Definitely. You go in timeout, CLS. I don't want to play with you yet. You can go sit over there.
Yeah.
So, Fawston, what's your take, brother?
So I mean, off the bat, I see this as the twin sister to Fracture, like how Scion's big ability is like Commander Luke Skywalker's stance change, of the same family, but they're different. The important thing about this one though is, like you were saying, you can do it again to somebody else. Whoever it's on is indefinite. It's gonna stay there until Treya dies, or you put it on somebody else. But there's gonna be isolation up until you take out Treya. So I don't really know what to think about the protection. So when you select an ally's cooldown to reduce, and you also give them 50% protection, it says through encounter, which makes me wonder, why wouldn't they just say gain 50 or recover 50% protection? It makes me think maybe it's supposed to be 50% max protection. I don't really know what's going on there, but I think
I thought it was worded weird too. I think you're right. Yeah.
Also cannot be evaded. More loose synergy with Scion's kit. You have all these guys that are just gunning for people with foresight. This is a big counter to Jedi Trey raining stuff. Jedi Trey raining. Ray.
I'm just glad I'm not the only one.
Something there didn't fit right, but yeah. I mean, I'm very glad that they spelled out exactly what is a positive status effect, and this is everything that it prevents. I don't remember if you read it, but the part against raids where the boss will get buff immunity, and attackers get critical damage up and lifesteal up for 1 turn. Are the buffs that they receive from attacking a boss with isolation on him.
Yep.
Or her, now that we are getting female raid bosses.
You don't know the sex of the Rancor. Don't be a
Treya.
misogynist.
Treya!
I mean,
Don't be a
the
misogynist.
the undercarriage is right there, but no one can tell.
So
With that
fair
skin suit on.
Yeah.
So good night, Punk. You got anything to add on that one?
Just you're talking about targeting. It's kind of crazy because I think this might be the first ability where you actually do get to choose an enemy and an ally, because they both say. So first off, it says dispel all buffs on target enemy. So you know you're targeting the enemy you want, but on the other side of it, it says reduce target allies cooldowns by 1 and grant them protection up 50% until the end of the counter. So it looks like with this ability, you're going to be able to pick both the ally and the enemy, which would be the first time that's ever happened. So I don't even know what to say to this isolation buff, because just the list of everything that it does is a conglomerate of all the best buffs and debuffs in this game into one, and it just it turns them into an NPC basically, because you're now fighting Scout Trooper who does nothing but a basic attack, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
So
wait, it doesn't have ability block, does it?
No, but they can't like use. Well, hold on. They can't gain any synergy from their team, and they can't give out synergy, and they can only use a. I think they can still use
I
ability.
see what you mean. Okay. I was thinking
Yeah.
only the basic ability. I see what you mean. Okay.
basic ability down to the point where they're not, using a special giving everyone turn meter, or giving
Right.
everyone offense up or offense down. It's just an ability that does damage, and okay,
Like
That's-
Luminara, just single target, very.
that's
quick
why
cut.
people don't use Cup and Ugnaught and those characters that just attack. That's what it turns them into. Basically, you just have
Turns
Cup
them
on
into
your
a
team now.
Ugnaught. There you go. It turns
Yeah,
them into
exactly.
a Ugnaught.
Exactly.
I like
This-
the term Kirill used was vanilla. I think it very
Yes,
accurately describes just how useless you're making them. Bland.
for sure.
Yeah,
This looks great. That's all I'm going to say. It looks great.
great. So now we're going to move on to one that's probably a little bit weird to talk about. She has a leadership. Lord of Betrayal. So it takes a Zeta. That's the first thing you guys need to know. Sith allies have, and I'm not sure where the Zeta kicks in, Faustin, if you want to check that, or if you already know, that'd be great.
I have searched and searched. I have hypothesized, but I have no facts.
That the same with me. All right, good night, Punk. To you, or we'll come around to it. So Sith allies have a plus 40% critical avoidance, and plus 40% potency. When a debuffed enemy takes damage, all Sith allies recover 10% health. Okay, pretty good. When an enemy uses an ability outside of their turn, they take damage equal to 35% of their max health. Holy shit! This
Excuse me?
damage.
How much?
35% of their max health. And this doesn't have the caveat that it can't kill them.
It does.
No, it does. It does actually.
Oh, it
does.
does.
Yeah.
Or else it would be just
Until the end of turn.
ridiculous.
Wait, okay.
That would be insane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I stand corrected. I'm sorry. So this damage can't. Oh, literally next sentence. This damage can't defeat enemies. When an enemy gains a buff, I literally wrote notes about it. I was like, "Oh my god, this is gonna break the meta," and now I just have to scrub all those out. When an enemy gains a buff outside of their turn, they lose 50% offense until the end of their next turn. That's a significant boon. So, big question that I had surrounding this: is it better than EP for a leader? If it does, the triumvirate, or if it isn't, does the triumvirate belong in a new team without EP as a leader? Now, I want to shoot that around the table first, and then let's go ahead and we'll you guys can throw in on your comments on the whole darn thing. So shoot it around first. Do you think that this leadership, with this leadership, that EP gets pushed to the wayside? EP, I mean Emperor Palpatine. And if it does EP have his own team, or does the Triumvirate start a new team, maybe with Sith Trooper and one other random character like Revan that's going to obviously come to the game? So let's throw it at Goodnight Punk. What are your thoughts on that?
So my first thought is when an enemy uses an ability outside of their turn, that includes basics, right? Basics are abilities. So this is basically really bad against CLS for sure, right? What other ways can you use an ability outside your turn?
Okay, so Hermit Yoda comes to mind, right? Because he's calling in assists or any assist ability.
Any assist, basically, yeah.
So assists, counters, those types of things.
I mean, R2 smoke screen. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So I mean, I think it becomes very meta defining as far as not defining. The meta defines whether you use her, I think, because some of the biggest parts to her are is that 35% damage whenever something's happening outside of the turn. Debuffed enemy takes damage. Sith allies recover 10% health. That's pretty huge. That in itself can make it good against most meta teams if you don't have counters or assists on them. I don't know. It's hard to tell how good it's going to be before you get to play it, because I didn't think Emperor Palpatine's was going to be that great, and he's just all over the place right now. So, and that just has a small little definition of, hey, when a buff drops off, gains some turn meter. So I don't really know. It looks good to me. It could be situational in spots, but it looks good.
Fair enough. So, out of curiosity, just real quick, do you think that you see her on an EP leadership, or do you think she takes on her own team?
I think she's going to work either way because on an Emperor Palpatine leadership, she's throwing out all kinds of debuffs. So whenever those, especially, okay, let's say the turn meter thing the order of operations we were talking about earlier is a thing, and she's under Emperor Palpatine. Well, she's putting a bunch of debuffs that pop the immediate second she hits them. She could be adding 5, 10, 15% turn meter to the whole team on one move under Emperor Palpatine, which would just be perfect to make that team super quick and better off than the other side. But I don't know. I think she's going to work really good under Palpatine, but I don't know how good off she is by herself yet,
Sure.
I know how Palpatine works, so I know that she'd be good under him. I just don't know how she works.
Right.
So,
Faustin, do you have any take on that?
Yes, I will do the pros to her leadership and the pros to Palpatine's leadership, but I will start by saying I prefer a Palpatine leadership. The ways I see a Treya leadership being really well is only if you have a Palpatine on your team, so that you can get the health steal up to make up for taking damage for these cleanses. That to me is going to be killer, because I'm so used to using a Darth Nihilus lead that I don't ever have to worry about healing. Every damage I deal is life steal. But with the literal buff from Palpatine, from his special, makes up for these guys getting cleansed and then taking damage for that cleanse. Even though we talked about earlier how his shock may interfere with Saber Storm as far as targeting people with buffs, but also the health steal helps with getting it up to full health. Under the Palpatine lead, I mean, they both do potency, but her thing instead of max health like Palpatine is critical avoidance. Critical avoidance is in direct contradiction to Scion's unique synergy with her, where it's whenever
if they get crit, right?
Yeah. So I mean, if you're not getting crit, you're losing out on that thing. So honestly, I see this more often with Palpatine lead, the triumvirate underneath, and then throw in Vader, for example. I mean, that's a safe bet. I mean, you could probably fill that position with other people. I think Mist in his breakdown of Treya's kit mentioned even just throwing Dooku in there because his Zeta gives extra protection, and there's more protection stuff that we've dealt with, like from Isolate on the target ally. So I would prefer a Palpatine lead.
Great. Kira, you got anything to add, Matt?
Yeah, she's not. I'm gonna say she's probably not gonna replace Palpatine. Palpatine literally at this point can kill a team without them taking a turn. I mean, and as cool as she is, I don't think she can do that. Like Palpatine can literally just, you're done. You don't get to play. I just killed you. So I mean, until she can do that, I don't think she'll replace Palpatine as the Sith leader. It's just it her kit is gonna be amazing underneath him because, like they mentioned before, all those debuffs, that's just killer. I mean, everything she does applies a debuff. I mean, dude, we have old Bens in freaking Emperor Palpatine teams right now just because he gives out so many damn debuffs. So I mean, just imagine her in there. That would just be amazing.
Yeah, I think there's anything that has to do with turn meter has stood the test of time. If you look at Rex, if you look at any of the leaderships that have really mattered, it's revolved around turn meter, and I think those are the people that stick around. And I think that you're probably right, but I'm going to leave a little window of opportunity there. I think that there is some possibility with some tweaking that we could possibly see a world where the triumvirate becomes the central focus, and maybe with the addition of Sith Trooper or something else, Vader, Emperor Palpatine, whatever it is, to where you could see the leadership. So unfortunately, Goodnight Punk just had to use the restroom. So let's go ahead and look into his room and see what we're seeing now.
He cheats.
he's gonna look back at the video and be like, "What the hell are you guys doing?" Yeah. So Wink beats, and what do you think that thing is on the wall there? Is that a birth certificate or is it like a graduation plaque?
I looking at my notes, I do feel like I need to correct myself on something. I was talking about really needing to rely on Palpatine's healing if you're going to run Treya's leadership because of taking those hits for the cleanse. But then there's that part about whenever a debuffed enemy takes damage, which is going to be all the time, Sith allies recover 10%, and that's all your Sith allies, I think, unless it's just the Sith ally that's hitting a debuffed enemy. I just don't know if that's the Zeta effect or if that's. Does Zeta effect also have an Omega right below it?
No.
They don't. Okay.
No.
Well, scratch that off my notes.
But I think that clause sounds more impressive than it is. The 10% health still on each hit, because once you chew through protection, you're halfway done. So
but she has a triple mollywop. That could be relevant.
No, I get it. Like if you're triple hitting, but what I'm saying is like your
Oh shit! So she's getting 30% health back if she gets that saber throw to deal damage all three times.
Possibly, right?
Well, we suspect.
Yeah.
Okay.
But once you go through protection and you're down to health, you realize that you're halfway done. You're halfway to losing at that point.
Well, I think that's going to be raising a different question a little bit later on, because as we talk about raids and stuff, I think health is playing a bigger factor into things than protection is. But we can kind of delve into that when the time is appropriate.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead, and since GMP is back and we're done analyzing his room.
See all the paper on the desk behind me?
So we'll move on to the unique. First of all, best name ever. Compassion is weakness. So good. Unfortunately, this requires a Zeta as well. When an ally suffers a debuff, Darth Treya gains 10% bonus protection, stacking until the end of her next turn. At the start of each Sith ally's turn, Treya dispels all debuffs on them and deal damage equal to 5% of their max health for each debuff dispelled. Note that it's their max health. This is
Right.
kind of playing on that whole thing that we just kind of segued into.
Oh, I had that wrong. I thought that was the leader ability.
When allied Darth Nihilus or Darth Scion are critically hit. So again, this is talking about like Treya getting critical avoidance on her leadership being a negative thing. But whenever Nihilus or Scion are critically hit or inflicted with a debuff, Treya gains 12% offense stacking for 2 turns. So the talking points that I want to really tackle on this is this brings up the same talking point as the leadership, and that we are going to want to run the would we want to run the triumvirate with Vader and Emperor Palpatine? Because in the mirror match, I could really see Vader being a detriment to your team, because that could make their Treya absolutely insane. Like if like that 12% stacking offense, like I don't care if her offense like or her damage is like 4K. When you're stacking like 12% for each buff, like and then the 5% of the max health, just forget about Grandma Tarkin ever being viable. So your takeaways. Let's go ahead and start out with Goodnight Punk on this one. What do you say about?
I think it's pretty interesting to finally find a chink in the armor. You know what I mean? With the dispelling all the debuffs, doing the damage onto them. That's a little something there where you gotta really think about what's going on with the team you're making with her to really make it all work together. Because up until this point, you really couldn't see any huge glaring problems, right? As far as perhaps up until this point, it's just pretty much been all fun, right?
Right, you've
But I
never
think
had
that
an issue with like wanting to run a Vader and not being able to run a Vader, but now you have to give pause for that. You're like, do I want to run a Vader? Because if they're running her, I don't want to use like calling or the AOE ever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I think this.
Hold on. You do, because any debuff you apply to a Treya team deals them damage once it expires. You still want to do debuffs to them, like big time.
Yep,
That's like
It becomes
actually,
it's more of a race at that point.
yeah.
Who's going to win this race?
This was kind of one of the reasons why I thought that Trey is going to be such with a Sith team against Sith teams. I mean, I had some things mixed up when we were talking about her leader thing. I thought that the part about dispels and taking damage in her unique was a part of that, but really what I was thinking of was Sith allies recovering the 10% health is going to make up for that unique. So it is viable, but it's also, I mean, Vader dots every time they tick is going to feed health under that leadership. But a lot's going to depend on what Nihilus's unique rework for the synergy looks like.
Fair enough. I'm sorry, GMP. Go ahead and finish your thoughts on that one.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it's no problem. This happens to me every time on our podcast. Memory of a goldfish. Whatever I was gonna say is gone. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. The one thing that bugs me about these posts they make for character strategies, right? They say final text with a zeta, but they don't say which part of the text is the zeta, right?
Right.
So I'm really wondering,
totally.
what parts of this leader ability and the unique are the zeta part, and which part is just going to happen naturally. So I'd assume with the unique that the damage to your team for the dispels is not the zeta, because I don't think that I would zeta that. But adding on to that, what part is the zeta of it? What's going to make this ability better than it looks without it? That's the one thing with these things that always throws me off.
CG really dropped the ball on like Vader, for instance. They put all the speed on the 7 abilities, and we're like, we're not going to Zeta him.
Yeah,
his
exactly.
unique. So yeah, good point. Anything else?
No, go ahead. I want to hear what you guys have to say.
All right, let's throw it over to Kirill. Kirill, what you got, bro?
Yeah, this is definitely a chink in the armor, and might be the way you beat her. So we're talking about all of these mirror match scenarios. So the way I would beat her is like I would just fracture her, and then just have all the debuffs expire on their team, and she's just sitting in the fracture, or per se, she's sitting in isolation from my Treya, and all the dispels on their team just crush their team. So she doesn't gain any buffs, she doesn't gain anything. She just sits there while the rest of her team dies because she's a callous bitch. She's
Fair.
What are the big debuff teams right now beyond the Sith Empire, combinations? Like what are good debuff light side teams?
Phoenix, Staggers, and
JTR,
Phoenix.
JTR, and Old Ben.
Resistance
Yep.
exposes.
Yeah, anything
I'm just
with
trying to
Old
figure
Ben
out what
is
the
only
biggest counters as far as buff creating teams beyond a mirror team would be to counter this team. You know what I mean?
Oh, buffs or debuffs?
Debuffs on the other team.
Okay.
I think you listed some of the better ones at this point, but it's hard to think beyond a mirror match what's going to work the best to combat this. If this was her main weakness, what besides something new would be the best way to combat it?
I think your Empire and your JTR and your JTR teams would do well.
I got one, and it's totally not arena meta, but for
this is going to be a Wampinator, isn't it?
there's no Wampa involved. But I was thinking of Gen Lead, Cassian, Old Ben, those types of the Gen leadership is definitely one that could do it for sure too. But I don't ever see that becoming an arena thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Cassian, though, because he's the only other guy I know of right now that could put so many debuffs up at once. But
And then spread them with his other special.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to hear from Mad Dad, though. What are your thoughts on like where the Zeta begins and ends, and what you would do with this unique with your own team composition?
All right, you got to put me on the spot, don't you? Okay.
Sorry.
If I had to speculate, I think it's the last clause. As far as Treya gaining the 12% offense, I think that is the standout strong ability, and I think they're saving that for the Zeta.
So you think of the synergy itself is the Zeta?
Well, not the synergy between Darth Nihilus and Darth Scion, but I think the very last sentence, Treya gains 12% offense stacking for 2 turns. Oh yeah, no. That is that is it. You're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think that would be the breakaway, because I think that is such a great ability, and it doesn't really impact you if you're just trying to run, her in the group outside of the triumvirate. So I think that that's where they bring it in. Now, where do I put her in my personal team? So, admittingly, I just tried Empire today. Put them in my arena team. One thing I learned is that I quickly switched over back to the Titans team because I do not have my Empire developed as much as I want to. So outside of that, where I see it kind of going is I see it going the way of Emperor Palpatine, the Triumvirate, and Sith Trooper. I honestly do. I think that Darth Vader ends up not making the cut, and that hurts me deep to my soul.
You're insane. You're insane if Darth Vader.
I honestly don't think he makes the cut.
Darth Vader makes Emperor Palpatine work right now.
It's like literally, he's the key for all the teams that I've placed in an arena, because if you can get either ability block him or stun him before Palpatine goes, then you have the best chance of beating that team. But if Vader's going before you, you're gonna have a hard time just doing anything.
Okay, and I think that all those things have a lot of merit to them. And Faustin, I'll throw it right back at you here in just a seccecond. I
See
think
you
all
ready, like
you're like, I'm going to jump on this Puma. But in all seriousness, I think that that's the current iteration of things. I think when the Triumvirate comes out, when we're able to develop them, and hopefully it's shorter than 3 months, I think you are going to see the current iterations go the way of the dodo. I think that you will see Emperor Palpatine still as the leader, and because of how many debuffs that Scion, Treya, and
Oh yeah.
uh, they apply, I think that Vader is going to end up going to the back burner. I really do. That's my prediction. It could totally be wrong, and I can look like a jackass. In 3 months, I'll be doing some interview with somebody. They're like, "You remember when you said that was going to be a thing?"
Science already your tank, bro. You don't even need such trooper. Science already your tank.
I like the
my
double
biggest
I
my
can see
biggest
it.
problem with that is Vader disappearing within a month of him actually becoming
Awesome.
super relevant. Especially for a character when this game came out, that was just impossible to get to 7-star because the only way you could do it was achievements.
Oh.
He for the longest time at the beginning of this game, having a Vader at 6 stars was just an achievement in itself. But he was not that great then, and it's the same with Grievous. Super hard to get, really not worth it. So now we've finally gotten to the point where that guy that took you forever to get is good, relevant, and a key cog in a team. For that to last 1 month would be just the biggest travesty I've ever heard.
And I share that thought. I do.
It's Vader. Like, really? Come on.
Yeah. Okay. So
your idea has merit because it could definitely happen. Because the way JTR, I worked my butt off to get her. I've used her in the arena since I had her, but already I'm having a hard time beating things with her just because of how fast things are switching. So I'm not saying there's a very good chance you're totally right about this, but it doesn't make it any less disheartening.
absolutely. So before Faustin pees his pants, Faustin, what's your thoughts, brother? I can see you over there. You're like,
my hope is that Punk is right with the Zeta part being the dispel and damaging. I will not do that Zeta. I think she works better without that part. I could fathom a lot of different combinations from these Sith teams. I think we have a lot more variety than we used to have, especially before that rework, especially before all these character releases. What I foresee is an acceptable composition where you take out Vader as long as you have Nihilus with his unique Zeta. That is making up for a portion of putting out enough debuffs there with Treya, with Scion. Alternatively, I expect to always see Scion and Treya together. They have too much stuff that just bounces off each other for an awesome combo. Nihilus kind of seems like the middleman out, where you can sub him in for other people. That's going to be where the variety is. Treya and Scion always together, in my opinion. My fear is that, with as much as I've been talking about Sith teams versus Sith teams, you know how Zader, the dots never go away; they always come back. So what happens when Treya, with the start of a Sith ally's turn, cleanses Vader's dots, takes the damage, they come back and they cleanse again, and it's an instant death.
You're talking about a Zader leadership.
Yeah, going up against a Zader leadership.
Oh.
There's got to be some kind of mechanic there that stops somebody from just instantly dying.
Boy, that would be hilarious, though.
I mean, no, it's not right to me. But I don't know. Like, I also
you take your turn, you die.
Yeah, like the other thing I feel about her unique is that it just doesn't work with her leadership thing. The synergy part with the if you are crit or suffer a debuff, but the crit part, her leadership is critical avoidance. I think even the developers suspect that they will not be using Treya's leadership. I think they'll be using Palpatine or Zader's.
So
Other than that, don't have too much. Just a lot of loose synergy with Scion with the direct synergy.
Hold on one second. I just want to throw this in real
Mhm.
quick. Is that I think that Nihilus, even though he lacks specific synergy, just the clause where it says if he gets a debuff because if he's going up against somebody that throws out a lot of debuffs, like in the mirror match, I think that's going to sell Nihilus's spot in the team on the unique, specifically with Treya. But GMP, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, it's interesting, you think about the idea of wanting her in a Vader or Palpatine-led team. Like, you look at this leader ability and you think, okay, well, maybe this is a bridge until you have Palpatine or Zader. But the part that throws me so off with that is the odds of you having this character and not those other two is just so small. It's confusing because the odds of you getting to the point where you're farming Treya shards, in my opinion, is you're probably going to be a year into the game. That'd be my guess. So
we're about 6 months away from even seeing 7-star Treya. So
yeah, well, yeah. So you even add that time onto it. But let's say you added a year to the point where you were ready to farm Treya, 6 months to farm her. By that point, you've already got those other leaders. So the question is the leader there so you can just pick which one you like better? Because you either like this leader ability and you use it to its fullest, or you put them behind one of the other two leaders and you get all that stacking offense to just wreak havoc. Or one is meant for arena and the other is meant for PvE. Because in my opinion, stacking offense doesn't really matter in arena. You're never going to get it to a point where it makes such a big difference that you're winning matches because of it. But as far as it goes into arena or raids, let's say, that stacking offense is huge because my favorite arena teams involve Asajj Ventress or Wampa. There I go again. All those.
By the way, I have Wampa, guys.
I have that guy. I like him a little bit. But the Marauder is another one that I really want to try just because he stacks offense like crazy too. Those ones all just seem to me like if you add that part to it, there's some kind of synergy for them in a different area of the game than arena. So that might be that you put her out of leadership for PvE and in leadership for arena, or
vice
however
versa
you want to work
is what you were suggesting. Although I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there that it's built on her unique. Never mind, because I was thinking the stacking offense is on her. It's on her unique, right?
right.
It is.
Okay.
The unique
yeah, I was going to say because I think there's a real chance that like if you include the Triumvirate in your team and a Vader goes against you and he uses his AoE, that's like what 36, 60, 72. I'm good at the math. 108. 108 offense is what you gain from one Vader hitting you with an AoE. 108 offense. That's kind of a big deal, right?
Well, that's after they expire, though, or after they get spelled.
Well, no. The synergy is if you suffer a debuff, you get plus 12% offense for 2 turns stacking.
Okay.
Not an expiration. The expiration is the
let's not worry about it. We're talking in circles anyway. So, all right, we are so deep into this. We are an hour and a half. We are only on the first topic. So,
the last thing I want to say real quick is I'm sorry. I know. The last thing I want to say is, I mentioned Thrawn's Fracture earlier being like a cousin to Isolate. I'm very interested to see what kind of teams will incorporate Thrawn with this. Gonna leave it there.
Yeah, super. Like, why can't I have 6 people on my team? All right, so we're going to go ahead and dive into the quality of life change.